Hi, I'm Middlesex County Field Director Ron Rios. Welcome to Spotlight on Middlesex County, where you can get the latest information and updates on developments in our county. November 11th is Veterans Day, when we honor all the brave men and women who have served our country. Our local, state, and federal governments honor our veterans year-round by helping those in need through special programs. Here in Middlesex County, we have a host of programs dedicated to veterans. Our first guest has dedicated his life to our veterans, Rich Liebler. He's a veteran himself and now works as the Chief Administrative Officer and Veteran Coordinator for the Sansone Military Assistance Training Program in Woodbridge. Mr. Liebler will discuss his experience in assisting veterans and their families, and this program's role in helping them find work. Also joining us today is Esperanza Maldonado, a graduate of Mr. Liebler's new Community Automotive Training Center. Ms. Maldonado will discuss her personal journey and current career at Sansone Nissan. Welcome, Rich and Esperanza. Thank you for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Rich, I know you're a Vietnam veteran, so first and foremost, I want to say thank you for your service to our country. And I know during that time, I was eligible for the draft. I didn't get drafted, but I saw from TV what you guys went through from TV of what you went through over there a little bit, and then of course what you went through when you came home, which was kind of disturbing, but things have changed since then toward veterans. And how has your experience given you the insight to help other veterans?
I think when you work with veterans, they appreciate the fact that you were a veteran. And if they're working with somebody, who was in a combat situation, I think they appreciate you working, with them if they know you, were in a combat situation. You can relate to each other better.
And how long have you been involved in job training and career counseling for our veterans?
I got involved in 1996. I was an automotive dealer. I noticed the fact that we didn't have a lot of young individuals that wanted to be technicians. I had just lost a son in a car accident. I wanted to do something in his memory. I knew Edsel Ford, at Ford Motor Company, because I represented all the Ford dealers in the country at that time, and convinced him to get Ford Motor Company to pony up some money and technology and training so that we could go into Newark and recruit at-risk individuals and train them for jobs in the automobile industry.
Maybe you could explain to our audience, why do some veterans have difficulty finding work?
Well, I think if you look at the profile of a lot of veterans, you're 17, 18 years old, you graduate from high school, you may not have the money to go to college, you may not know exactly what you want to do in life, so you take time off and you spend 3 or 4 years in the military. When you come out, you have discipline, but you don't necessarily know what you want to do, for a career. So helping them kind of make these decisions is what is needed.
You've worked not only with veterans, but with at-risk individuals and ex-offenders. What has that been like?
It's been a learning experience. When you don't grow up in the same situation that some of these individuals grew up in, you start off making a lot of mistakes in your perceptions of what they should be and what their life was like, and slowly they educate you, as to what they need. And over the years, I've slowly developed, I guess, a knowledge and what they need, and then I try to supply those needs.
And you must come across a lot of individuals that experience those ups and downs, let's say, for lack of a better term.
Definitely.
Yeah. Esperanza, thanks for joining us today. And when did you first enroll at the new Community Automotive Training Center, and why?
I enrolled in 2005. I enrolled while I was in the halfway house, so I was one of those at-risk individuals when I enrolled into the program.
And can both of you define what really is an at-risk individual?
I believe an at-risk individual is a person that is in an environment where they can make a wrong decision. They don't have anybody there that can guide them, and they're on the cusp of, should I do the right thing or should I do the wrong thing? And without the proper guidance and funds, a person can fall into the wrong thing very quickly.
Rich?
Well, that's what I found. I found that if you're not guided towards something, whether it's to stay in school, whether to pursue a college degree or a vocational trade, that's the missing thing. And some people just don't know how to navigate from their current situation into more conventional lifestyles. So what we do at New Community is that we give them an option, to learn something, learn a trade, be an automotive technician. And more than half of them don't end up by being technicians. They just will use that as a stepping stone into something that they want to do. We stabilize them, we get them in a positive direction, and make them understand that there's an alternative direction that they can go.
And that's got to make them feel good that there's somebody out there trying to help them.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. That's the whether it's going to work or not. When you have somebody backing you, just knowing that there's somebody else that wants you to succeed other than yourself. Somebody outside of your family, just somebody outside of you that wants you to succeed, that makes you want to do it that much more. Because you don't want them to see you fail, and you don't want yourself to see you fail. You know what I mean? So
Right.
It makes it easier.
That's interesting. Rich, I understand you have a degree in professional counseling, work as a counselor for incarcerated veterans. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I started 22 years ago doing counseling, kind of my own version of it. And, the individuals that I work with have trained me to possibly change the way that I approach them. So a few years ago, I decided to go back to graduate school and get an actual graduate degree in professional counseling. And what I'm doing is finishing up internships now, and I'll actually have the degree next summer. And you actually start getting, even at my age, you get hooked on education because it's nice to learn new things and keep up. So I'm going to proceed into alcohol and addiction counseling. I'm going to learn how to do that, family counseling, and try to tie it all together so that when a veteran needs help in any direction, at least I'll have the training to help them.
How do you find the time to do that between working and doing the counseling that you do now? I mean, it's got to be a challenge.
One of the things I teach, and I do a weekly session with my school in Newark, and one of the things I teach them is that there's 24 hours in a day. You need X amount of hours to sleep, X amount of hours to eat, you need to relax a couple hours, and lo and behold, there's still another 12 hours. So you might as well fill it with something productive.
Something productive, right?
So
Wow.
I do better when I'm busy.
All right, Rich, now let's talk about the County Adult Corrections Office and our Office of Workforce Development. How do you help our veterans obtain jobs through this office?
Well, luckily a couple of years ago, Mr. Sansone started pushing forward with this idea to work with veterans and actually donated $250,000 to start the Sansone military program. And I had found out kind of accidentally that there's 200,000 veterans that are incarcerated. 8% of the prison population is actually veterans, which I didn't know, and I don't think a lot of people know. So that's when we started putting together the military program at City Hall, where we have somebody there that can help veterans navigate. And now, basically because of you, I'm allowed to go into the Middlesex County Jail and work with their medical director, Dr. G we call him, and we do a group session for whatever veterans are incarcerated in the county jail. And something that we just added last week, which I think is going to dramatically change what we do, Mr. Sansone now allows us to do paid internships. Because one of the problems when somebody is incarcerated, the day they get out, they need income. So what are your choices? If you don't have somebody that's bankrolling you and a family, you're going to go left or right. Left is going back to what you know. So what we're trying to do is the right, We're starting from day one coming out of prison, we'll do a paid internship for up to a month. We'll either hire the individual that is qualified, or we'll refer them to what we're hoping will be 500 other dealers in the state of New Jersey.
I give Mr. Sansone a lot of credit for taking the initiative and just taking that kind of money. That's a lot of money.
Yes, it is.
And it could help in so many ways, long term, which is so important. It's not just, you know, your program there is not just a short-term solution and where they could, you know, it's really for the long term, and that's commendable and it's so important. And let me ask you a question. If a veteran is looking, has a certain interest in a certain area, and they need more, but needs more training, what do you do?
Well, what people don't realize is that we're not just sales and technicians. We have a lot of different types of jobs, from cleaning the cars to a parts department, to work in the office, working in the internet department, doing maintenance. So what we allow a veteran to do is to come in and job shadow. If you want to look what it's like to be a salesperson for a day, spend a day with Esperanza. If you want to do, you know, be a technician, spend a day with the technician. And then once you decide what you like, we flip it into the internship program, where we actually work with people that are doing that job. And at the end of the month, you can determine whether or not you like us, we like you, whether you like, you know, what the job is, if we have an opening, if we need to refer you to another part of the state. You know, it all comes together.
And that's interesting because you work with other dealerships as well, correct?
Yeah, we're about to go to the state organization, you know, which represents 500 dealers, and we're going to go to them and say, all right, find out for me how many dealers will work with veterans, how many dealers will work with veterans that have been incarcerated. And once I have that list and it's spread through the state, you know, we'll teach other employers how to do the job shadowing and internships and try to replicate what we do.
I'm going to ask this question for both of you. What kind of help do incarcerated people need, especially veterans? What do they need from either their families or the government? Esperanza?
Support. They need support emotionally and financially. More so financially than emotionally, because I'm sure that they can find the emotional support somewhere else, but financial, because if you don't have any money to feed your family or to feed yourself or to get where you need to go or to just live in general, you're going to do something, because that's the basic necessity of life. If you don't have that, of course you're going to go back to what you know. So financial, educate them, give them a way to feed their family, and you'll have somebody that is going to be paying taxes. You'll have somebody that you don't have to worry about reoffending. And you'll have somebody that's going to be a loyal employee because they knew how hard it was to obtain that job. So finance, that's what they need.
Rich?
What's great at your county jail is that you actually have a mental health director that can work with individuals that may have a mental health issue, and you also have caseworkers that'll try to transition the individual, you know, back into society. Do they have, you know, their birth certificate? Do they have a social security number? And the biggest issue that we're facing right now is driver's licenses. Because when an individual is in jail, they don't exactly get their registration renewal, and they can't go to motor vehicle with 6 forms of ID. So a lot of them come out and they don't have driver's licenses. So we just have to help them, you know, navigate the system a little bit. The difference of helping an individual or letting them go back to the street is so easy. It's almost scary that it's not being done better than it's being done right now. The day they get out of jail, if they know they have a job or they're going into a training program that leads to a job, you're 90% of the way home, and then you back into, you know, the other issues with driver's licenses and so on and so forth, and then possibly you can deal with maybe some mental health issue, especially with the veterans. You know, there's a lot of veterans with PTSD. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, I understand that process, and you got to be sensitive, you know, to what their time, what time is needed for them to reacclimate, you know, to a civilian job. That's why individuals like Paul Sansone that kind of understand this need and allow his employees to work with it is absolutely key. More employers need to understand what a veteran who just did 7 tours in Afghanistan is coming back, and if they were in a trauma situation, you know, you gotta be careful how you deal with them and understand symptoms of anger management and anxiety, and you know, just work with it a little bit, and they'll be fine.
And what you said is very interesting, because years ago, and I guess when you served your 2, 4, 6, or if you were a career person, it was a steady, you were steady in the military, where today they come out and then they may go back and deployed again, and then they come back home and then they get deployed again. Like you said, sometimes how many deployments do they?
You can have individuals that have done 6 and 7 deployments.
And you know, just I guess the emotional roller coaster of being deployed away from your family, away from the society that we live in, and then coming back and then getting used to that comfort zone of home, right? And then, I mean, that's got to be traumatic, that in itself, let alone the complexities of being in a war zone.
One of the things you learn in mental health counseling, and when you go through PTSD type of situations, the trauma always stays with you. You can never not have the trauma in your head. And what you have to do is just see that it's coming, that it's affecting you in an anxiety or anger way, and just learn how to deal with it. So I think a lot of these veterans are starting to get help, and the VA is getting a lot better at putting a group of Iraq veterans together and let them talk amongst themselves, you know, with a psychologist sitting there that knows how to take the conversation, and in some cases give the individuals their proper medication.
And quite honestly, you know, our government has a role of responsibility to do whatever it can to help our veterans. You know, no questions asked. That's the way it should be. But in any event, my next question for each of you: how did you each come to work for Mr. Sansone?
Well, ironically, he and I were competitors for 35 years. When I owned Hillside Automall back in the day. I decided after I sold my business to go work at Job Corps and put an automotive training program together for Job Corps, similar to what I had in Newark. And I brought Mr. Sansone down to motivate the individuals about, I'm an employer and I have jobs, you know, do what you need to do and come and work for me. And then somehow we tied it together that I went and worked for him. And I guess we have a common thing here where we want to work with the at-risk population, and we want to work with veterans together. And, you know, I have my main job that I do at Sansone, but he allows me to, you know, do what I do helping veterans. And I think we hired a dozen last month.
Wow.
And they are. I'm slowly taking over the place. I'm going to form my own company of Marines there. And ironically, you know, about 7 of them were Marines, which makes me feel good. And you can't have better employees than a Marine. Not that I'm prejudiced or anything, but you ask them to jump and they just ask you, you know, how high.